Good morning, everyone. This is BritSimon. I thought I'd jump online and do a little bit of a Q&A session here. It always fascinates me, actually, no matter when I choose to do this, what time of the day, what day of the week, there's always some people around that somehow get to know that I'm doing a live, because I don't plan the live sessions. I just do it when I have time, and they jump on and ask questions. So that is what tells me that there is a need for this, and I know people can watch the replay of the live sessions later, and hopefully that adds some value and answers some questions for people. So let's just assume that some people will probably do the same today. Now, I know I'm going to get asked about this, so let me just do this again. DV2020 and DV2021. Do we have any news? No, there's no news. There was some Twitter activity this week, I think it was, or late last week, which was about people generally getting frustrated about the lack of timeline on the appeal. But there is no particular timeline that the appeal court has to work to. So they can, in theory, they can take as long as they like. I don't think they will take much longer, personally, just as a hunch, but it is a complicated case, and there's some pretty big, important decisions being made. The government were really unhappy with the limitation of their powers, or the presidential powers, that Judge Mehta originally imposed in the original Gomez suit in DV 2020. And so the government see this as a fight worth fighting, not because they're trying to attack the immigrants in the DV program, not because there's some agenda against the DV program or anything else, but mainly because the principles that were argued against successfully by our side, by the lawyers on our side in Gomez, like Jesse Bless and Curtis Morrison and Chuck Cook and all of the other lawyers, those principles were were sort of attacking very core pieces of the INA, of the law, and that's what got the government nervous, frankly. So they don't want to lose that suit, but they lost it, and that's why they appealed. And so that's why the fight goes on. So we just have to wait for the outcome of that. Okay. Okay. Let's talk about. Let's say good morning to some people. I just talked about the Go case. That's one of the DV 2020 and 21 cases. So I just did that. Oh, it's an interesting one. Hussein says you've got an interview next week. Any advice? Yeah. So prepare well. Make sure you've read the instructions. You should have read the instructions way back, right? But make sure you've got everything you need. Do you have all the documents that you need that for your particular case are needed? Have you read the local embassy instructions? Have you obtained all of the police certificates? Have you done your medical? When you go to the interview, be relaxed. There's absolutely no need to practice answers, right? The questions are completely trivial questions, like that they ask you. It's a trivial conversation, unless you've done something very stupid, like said you were single when in fact you're married. The questions won't be looking into anything. They're just going to be very conversational. So they might ask you things like, what are you planning to do in the USA? Now, you don't answer that with a lie. You answer that with a truth, and it should come from the heart, and it should be just natural. But it's also not a big question. If you say you're going to be in the IT industry, I would assume that that's because you've already got some training and some sort of, some basis to say that. But it would also just be a natural reaction. And then that doesn't qualify you for the visa or disqualify you for the visa. It's just a conversation. It's just the CEO is just trying to have a human conversation with you. And so, they may be wondering, do you have a realistic plan? Now, if you say, yeah, I've always worked in a retail store, but I'm planning to be an astronaut and I'm going to Alaska, and I'm going to be an astronaut. Well, A, there are no Alaskan astronauts. B, you're not likely to become a freaking astronaut. C, you've only worked in retail, right? I mean, it's just not a reasonable plan. So they're just looking for, have you got a reasonable plan? That's all it is. So prepare well, make sure your paperwork is in order, relax about the questions, no need to practice them, just have a conversation and you'll be fine. And the interview will probably last 5 minutes or less. It's the easiest way to get a green card. So relax and good luck. Let me know how it goes with you. So we got someone from UAE. Hi, Bowie. Bowie. That sounds like a mispronunciation of Barry. Okay, so let's just take some other questions here. We've got people from Kenya. Morning, Margaret. Hi, Simon. Case number 44K. Do you have an estimation for Tunisia? Right. Firstly, I don't have estimations. And I don't have, in your particular case, you haven't given me actually which region you're in, which year you're in. So you gave me nothing to go on. So basically, I can't say anything about your question. Rwanda, look at that. This is what I mean. People from all over the world. I love it. Islamabad embassy updates, if any, as it sucks. Afghans are suffering. Yeah, I met just yesterday. I was talking to a gentleman from Afghanistan. Although he left Afghanistan as a young child many years ago, but we had an interesting conversation about the culture there, etc. It breaks my heart, obviously. All the people that are displaced, whether it's Afghans, whether it's Ukrainians, Russians, I mean, you name it. You name it. All the problems around the world and all the unfairness that we've seen with embassies being closed down. But for Afghanis, yeah, they are assigned to Pakistan, to Islamabad embassy, and then Islamabad doesn't seem to be doing anything. And it's as unfair as you could say it's unfair in Accra or in Nairobi or any of these embassies that are just not working enough. And unfortunately, there's no way we can force them to do anything. So I hope that gets better for you. If there was any justice, it would. But unfortunately, this isn't something we can apply any sort of legal justice or effort to make an individual embassy work harder. It just doesn't seem to work. We've tried. The lawyers have tried, and it just doesn't seem to work very well. Next VB in AS, will it be current? Thank you. I don't know. Look, you're asking for a prediction. I can tell you that mathematically there's no reason for the region to be current. And I've been saying that for a long time. And but there are factors that can happen that make a region go current, even when it shouldn't go current. But if you're looking at the last 2 or 3 years as an example, because you say, well, it went current in 23 and 22 and 21, and or went in 22, 21, 20. Yes, it did, but that was because those years were screwed up by all the stuff going on. And so you can't look at those years as being normal years. In a normal year, if we had 118,000 selectees, as we do in DV 2023, then it's only right, it's only expected, it's logical that some people will miss out, right? And to give you an idea of why I'm saying that, in DV 2022, they maxed out the visas. They issued more than 55,000 visas, right? They even broke their own rules. They broke their own laws by issuing more than the visas that they were supposed to issue. But my point is, to fill that pot of 55,000 visas, they set interviews for 72,000 people, right? So if you only need to schedule interviews for 72,000 in order to get 55,000 visas, bearing in mind that some people won't turn up for the interview, some people will get refused at the interview, some people will be put on AP, 221G and have too long. That will take too long, so they don't have time to get their case through. But so if you need 72,000 people to be scheduled in order to get 55,000 visas, then having 118,000 people or 119,000, whatever the number is this year, is clearly too many people. And so they've over-selected, right? There are not enough visas to go around. So in Africa, Africa is basically current right now. There's only one case that isn't current. Literally one case, right? And so that happened because so many countries in Africa are having a terrible time where their embassies are misbehaving. That is effectively destroying the chances of people in those countries, like Africa and Accra Embassy, Nairobi Embassy, and so on. And so that's given a better chance for high case numbers in other countries, right? That's why Africa has done as well as it's done in DV 2023. It's the dysfunction in Africa that has caused the case numbers to go high. Asia has got some dysfunction, but not as much as Africa, and so that's why we're not seeing. We're not seeing the VB go to a very, very high case number. There's really no need for it to go to a high case number. So that's the explanation. Sorry for the long-winded explanation, but I hope that makes it clear to you. Other than that, I can't predict what they'll do because I'm not really privy to the workings other than seeing the results of what they're doing. And the results of what they're doing shows that they're doing the right thing in keeping the numbers to the level they are now. So there you go. Omar says, I was born back in November. Oh, congratulations. You're speaking so well for only being 7 months old. What do you mean? Oh, you were, sorry, I'm dyslexic, so I'm not even sort of reading this correctly. I added a newborn back in November. But the 2NL didn't come with his name. Okay, that's very normal. So the 2NL comes with the people they knew about at the time of your entry, right? And so if you get married or if you add a newborn after the initial DS260 is filled, they never add those names to the 2NL. The 2NL is sent with the original. So there's no problem. There's nothing broken in your situation. It's fine. If you're worried, you can email the embassy. You've got your 2NL. The embassy now have your case. You can email the embassy and say, I've had a newborn in November. I plan to bring him to the interview. But there is a visa allocated for the newborn. That's one of the things that they do. All right, so you'll be okay. Don't worry about it. Liberia, Felicia. I won DV, but my kids won't come with me. Should I just fill out my own DS260? Yeah, if you are sure that your kids are not going to travel with you, as for the first few months. Now, bear in mind that when you're issued a visa under DV, you have 6 months to enter. So if you're issued a visa, if your plan is that you're going to enter and then bring the kids several months later, you might want to have the kids with you and go through the DV process with you in the process, because you can bring them within the 6 months. Maybe you go immediately as soon as you get the visa. You start working, you establish a home, you figure things out, and then you bring the kids within the 6 months, right? You can do that. You can also bring the kids for a visit, and if you need longer to establish yourself, send them back home after a couple of weeks or whatever, and bring them again in another 6 months or a year, right? After that. So, but if you think you're never going to take the kids with you, then yes, you don't have to create DS260s for them. You list the children on your DS260, but you don't have to complete the DS260 for the kids. They'll be on your form when you open up the DS260. You'll see their names there if they were included in your entry. You just don't have to submit those DS260s, right? So that's you only fill a DS260 for each person that wants a green card. Okay. Can the error in the name of my place of work affect me? Should I request to unlock my DS260? No, very unlikely. That's a name in the place of work. I don't know. Is it an error in the address or error in the name of the company? Either way, it doesn't make any difference. They're not that picky. They're not checking in finite detail whether you filled the form in correctly. So that's just not something to unlock for or to worry about. If you were to unlock for some other reason, then you would correct it, but don't unlock and correct for that, okay? Why no 2NL after VB update for Nepal? Because it's the 20th of May. Like, you should know by now, if you're a DV2023 case, that the visa bulletin is published and then the 2NLs start, but the 2NLs continue for the remainder of the month and right up until the first week or so of the following month, right? We continue to get 2NLs. So you just have to be patient. Don't freak out every time when, you know, when Nepal is not the first place that gets the 2NLs. Relax. You're fine. My case number is AF103K for DV2024. Is there chances? Okay, so people are still worried about the case numbers they're seeing in DV2024. There's some very high case numbers. 122K is the highest African case number I've heard of. I've heard of an EU 77K, although most of the EU cases I've heard are 65K or below. I've heard a almost crazy OC number of 6,800. That sounds bananas to me, but it's yeah, I believe it. That particular person that reported that one, I believe that person. And I've heard several up to 5,000 in OC. Asia, I think I've seen 40,000 something, 44,000, I believe I've seen. So there are some high case numbers. There's no doubt about that, right, in DV 2024. Now, the case numbers are not continuous, and there are holes in between the case numbers. So if you take the numbers from 1 to 10, there won't be 10 cases from 1 to 10. There might be 2, there might be 3. Now, if there's 3 cases, real cases from 1 to 10, and 7 cases that are holes, right, then that's a 70% holes rate, or a 30% density of cases. The density of cases is what's important, or the number of selectees is what's important, right? So you could have a case number of Africa 103K, but if the density of cases is only 20%, let's say, then there's only 20,000 cases in front of you. It's not 100,000 cases in front of you. Do you see what I mean? So, and why am I picking on 20%? Well, if I look at OC, so the 3 bigger regions, Africa, EU, and Asia, have a sort of a staggered, they have a reducing density rate through the number ranges. That's because some countries get cut off. I've explained that in some other videos. Won't go into detail about it now, but it's reducing. In South America and Oceania, it's not like that. The density rate of cases, real cases versus holes which are cases that were disqualified before the results were even announced, right? The number in Oceania particularly is static. So we know that if we look at Oceania, you can look at the density rate and it will be the same approximately in the first 100 cases as it is in the next 100 cases and the next 100 cases after that. And if we do have cases of 6,800 in Oceania, and if we've got a reasonable number of selectees, let's say about 3,000 selectees, which will be about 1,500 cases, then we would have 1,500 cases in 6,800, right? So you could work out the density of that. Do you see what I mean? So it's only once we know the selectee numbers, which we'll know in July and August, that we can begin to work out the number of real cases that must mean. And we use the number of real cases to work out the density in the regions, which, as I say, will be more complex in Africa, Europe, and Asia than it is in South America and Oceania. But nevertheless, I'm pretty sure that what we're going to see, just my assumption, my working assumption, is that since we see numbers double what we saw in DV 2023, we're going to see double the number of holes, effectively. We're going to see a massive increase in the number of holes. Because I don't believe they've gone out and selected 240,000 people, which would be a doubling of the selectees. I don't believe they've done that, right? So there's a reason why the numbers are doubled. And I don't believe it's because there are double the number of selectees. Therefore, it must be there are much more holes than in DV 2023. So, you know, I should probably do a video that explains that in more detail and what my theory is about that and why that's happened. I think there are some specific reasons why that happened, but we'll know for sure in July, July or August when we see the visa bulletin published then. Okay. All right, Sudanese. Yeah, no, Sudan is another area of the world that's just very sad. So Sudan has just been. It was changed this week that Sudanese applicants are now going to be allocated automatically to Cairo. So so Cairo is your embassy, right? You need to start thinking in terms of that. You can also, if you're in one of these embassies where the embassy closed, they eventually allocate an embassy that will pick up that work. And thankfully for Sudan, they did it pretty quickly. They closed the Sudan embassy, what, about 3 or 4 weeks ago? Maybe it was more. I'm just working from memory, but they've already allocated Cairo as the replacement embassy. That's a good thing that they worked quickly to do that. The same thing applies for example, Ukraine and Russia, where the Moscow embassy is closed because Putin's an asshole. So they've said, okay, for Russians, you're going to go to Warsaw. And then for Ukrainians, you're going to be in Frankfurt or Warsaw, right? And so, because of course, the Kiev embassy is also closed, right? So, so that's what they do. They give those things. However, if you're a Ukrainian and Warsaw or Frankfurt is not convenient for you, and you happen to be in France, for example, you can ask KCC to schedule you in France because you're living there. And so, there is a bit of flexibility for people in that position. Same thing will apply for Sudanese applicants. You'll have a bit more flexibility. In practice, it might be difficult to get KCC to go along with that, but that's how it should work. Okay. But if you were previously assigned to Sudan embassy, you will now automatically be assigned to Cairo. And that will be your your working embassy. Okay. Please, what is the issue with Cameroon embassy? No 2NL since April. Face red, droopy eyes. Yeah. So again, they haven't finished. There's no need to panic, Michael. It's only the 20th of May. I expect there to be another 2 weeks of 2NLs, which will be for July interviews, right? So, so they will issue some in May. I believe they will. Okay. 2020 selectee. What is the status of the Meng Amendment on visas recapture? There's nothing. There is no bill, no law that is currently trying to include the Meng Amendment as part of its law. And I've always thought that the Meng Amendment was pretty unlikely to ever become law. So unless it gets tagged on to something, and somehow sneaks through, I don't think it's going to happen. So honestly, I wouldn't be holding your breath for that one. Morocco embassy doing a great job. Can it get to 56K case numbers? Based on your experience, yeah, it can do. It's doing a great job. It can do. Will it for you? Will your case? I don't know. It depends on a number of factors. When did you become AV status? How are you aligned with other people, etc. How many cases Morocco continues to take, etc. You just have to keep your fingers crossed. Okay. What can we do in the case of 221G status and all missed documents was sent? Really, there's a couple of things you can do. You can wait patiently, right? And generally that takes, so the way 221G works is if you're lucky enough to interview, let's say in the first week of the month, and you get your documents back to them very quickly, then there's a chance that you'll be issued automatically within that same month, right? Let's say you went for an interview at the beginning of May, it's the 20th of May now, you already gave them your missing documents, you were missing something in the interview, that's all you had to give, and you've got that back to them. Then sometimes they'll issue that visa very quickly within the same month. But if that process crosses over into the following month, right? So, it crosses over into June, then at the end of May, they have to send your visa back to KCC to reallocate that visa into the next available applicant, right? So the embassy at that point, let's say you, for whatever reason, you sent your documents back late, and the embassy isn't able to approve your case by the end of May, and then they are able to approve your case, let's say the first week of June, right? Then they have to go back to KCC and ask for the allocation of another visa to your case, or for each person in your case. And that adds some time. That adds a couple of weeks at least. Depending on the time of the month, it could add 2 or 3 weeks to the process. So if your case is very simple, that you were put on 221G only because you had some documents missing, and you provide those documents quickly, then the time of the month when all of that happened becomes important, because it's a matter of, does it cross into the next month or not? And in general, therefore, it's difficult to predict how long that will take to finish off, right? Because it depends on when you interviewed, when you provide the documents, how quickly the embassy, how available to do that work they were, and all sorts of factors. It's just too much. So you just have to be patient, is the honest answer. Now, if you're not a patient person, and if you've got $4,000 to burn, then you can hire a lawyer who will do a mandamus lawsuit on your behalf, quite happily, for $4,000. And they will sue the government to try and get the government to move quickly. The government may be moving as fast as they can move anyway, so the mandamus lawsuit, in my mind, is of questionable value, because the cases, as we're sitting here in May, even in June and July and August, there is time for the embassies to do the processing. And so paying a lawyer to force the government to do what they were probably going to do anyway doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But that is your other option. If you've got $4,000 and you've got no better place to spend that money on, then you can go hire a lawyer. It's your choice. That's the American dream. You can always choose to hire a lawyer. But will it? In most cases, I would say you're going to have the same outcome anyway. It's just a matter of whether you can be patient or not. There are some cases where a mandamus lawsuit has made the difference, but it's very difficult to say how many if you took 100 mandamus lawsuits, how many were truly needed. You only know that if you could look into some crystal ball and you could say, oh yeah, it had, like 80 of those cases were issued anyway, and would have been issued anyway, but the mandamus lawsuit maybe made 10 extra being issued. I don't know how you calculate that without knowing which ways it could have gone, right? So it's a gamble. Is do you want to spend that money or not? It's your choice. Okay. Is there a way to track the progress of the 260? Is it processing or processed? Yeah, you can't really track it on the web as such. They don't sort of have a pizza delivery time sort of graphic or anything. But what you can do is you can email KCC occasionally, and you can ask them for the status of your DS260, and their response tells you what position you're in. When your DS260 is processed, they respond saying the email response says something like your DS260 is processed, right? There's 3 or 4 letters or emails that we commonly see, and you'll either get an email back saying your DS260 is processing, right, or it's processed. Now, there's no real sort of indication between those when you're going to get how soon it will be. Most of the time that it takes for DS260 processing is waiting time. It's waiting for your position in the line for the workers they've got at KCC to get to your case, open it, and start processing on that, and decide whether they need any special processing, special background checks or whatever else on your case, or whether it's a very simple one, right? So the very earliest submitted DS260s probably will be processed in June sometime, right? And then there'll be a bunch of DS260s which will take months to process, even though they were submitted in pretty early in May. That's just the way it works, right? So but the only way you can know is by emailing KCC. Okay, I'll do a video actually on the letters and what they mean, the emails and what they mean. Okay. Thank you. You helped me in my DV2022 journey. Oh, greeting from Seattle. See you in LA. That's awesome. I hope you're having fun there. During the time of my entry, left the space where they asked the number of children blank. Will it affect me at time of interview? If you leave, if you've got children and you didn't include them on the DV lottery, you will be disqualified. If you have a spouse and you said you were single, if you were married but you said you were single, you will be disqualified. There's no way around that, right? So, and many of the people that asked me these sort of questions thought it was no big deal for some reason, even though the form itself, the entry process itself, makes it very clear that if you leave someone off the entry that is an eligible derivative, that's a spouse or a child, you will be disqualified. Even though the form itself makes that clear, even though the instructions make that clear, even though I beat that drum endlessly every year, all the time, and I tell people still do that, and then they're surprised when they go to interview, they pay their interview fees, which are non-refundable, and then they lose those fees and get disqualified. And they're surprised. They're like, well, I thought I could fix that. The guy down the road in the internet cafe told me not to worry about it, right? And he seems pretty smart. Well, I'm telling you 100% you will be disqualified. The only way that you can sort of get around that is by telling lies and committing immigration fraud, which is a stupid thing to do because you can never fix that. You can never fix that problem. Even if you get away with it to start with, you'll always have a target on your back. You'll always have a problem. You'll never be able to bring those kids, just forget it. So the best thing is just don't fill in your DS-260. Don't proceed because you're not going to be able to fix it. There is no way to fix it. There's no lawyer who can fix it. There's no witch doctor who can fix it. There's no act of God or any amount of praying that will fix it. It will not get fixed. You will be disqualified. Okay. Brian here's DV2023, case number 67, no region. I was due for interview on 15th of March. Medicals on 9. So after the medical, I was told TB results will be out 9th of May, but I haven't heard from IOM or Nairobi Post. Okay, but that's 11 days ago. So speak to IOM, check with IOM. I mean, congratulations, by the way, on getting an interview in Nairobi. You're one of the few, Brian. Don't screw it up at this point, right? So check with the IOM and check on your results, and check that your results have been sent to the embassy. And hopefully the embassy, who's doing bugger all else, they may as well process the rest of your case since they interviewed you, because they frankly are not doing anything else. So so yeah, hopefully that will get sorted out. All right, but 11 days waiting is not a long time, right? It's not like that. This is not a quick process. If someone have a problem with his legs, still allowed to get DV visa? I love these strange questions. What problem have you got with your legs? Is it you've got 7 legs? Is that the problem you got because you were born in Mars? Well, you're probably the sort of alien they don't want in this process. No, I'm being silly, but so nobody cares about your legs, right? The only diseases, the only things that the medical really cares about is, are you bringing a disease to America that will cause a problem for Americans, right? And there are 4 diseases of significance. They're classed as diseases of public health significance. These are things that are catching, they're contagious, right? Now, having a problem with your legs, unless you're going to come over here and everybody else's legs are going to start falling off or something, then that isn't a problem for immigration purposes. Now, the only other thing they might say is the problem with your legs, I wish you'd be a bit more clear about what the problem was, but is the problem with your legs going to stop you from earning a living, in which case you can't support yourself and therefore will become a public charge? That's the other possibility. But assuming that that's not the case, because most people, even if they've got a disability with, movement of their legs, for example, someone who's totally paralyzed waist down, you can find plenty of jobs and work that you can do. You may be physically disabled, but that doesn't mean you can't make a living. You can do whatever you want to do. There's amazing opportunities for physically disabled people. So I wish you'd been a bit more clear, but it probably will have no impact on your visa process. But sorry for the jokes. I just, I've got the humor, I've got the sense of humor of a 5-year-old. So I find things funny, which pisses people off sometimes, but I don't care. So, do you think Nairobi will reach 40K and above cases? I'm from Kenya. No, I don't. I think, how can I put this? Most people assigned to Nairobi are not going to win. They're not going to get their chance. There's a chance that Nairobi do something like what they did last year, which is issue like hundreds of cases all in one go in 1 month. But even if they do that, that's nowhere near enough. Most people assigned to the Nairobi embassy are not going to get their visas. I'm sad to say. Will they go to 40K and above? It's kind of like, it's not even the point. Loads of visas under 40K will still miss out. Even if somebody at 40K gets their visa, it doesn't mean everybody under 40K gets their visas. It doesn't mean that at all. So it's horrifying. I'm sorry if I seem blasé about it. I'm torn up inside about it, actually. But there's nothing we can do about it. So, it just sucks. Does the embassy in Ghana request an affidavit of support for DV lottery interview? I would not go to an interview in Accra unless I had all my stuff lined up, all my paperwork absolutely perfect, because Accra in the past have been very, very keen to refuse cases. That I've seen 1 in 8 cases in previous years being disqualified or refused at Accra embassy, right? So I wouldn't go there unless I was fully prepared. And being able to answer the financial aspects of the DV case is important too. So I would go there with an I-134, 100% I would. Will they ask every person for that? I don't know. But why would you risk it? If you're lucky enough to get an interview in Accra out of the 25 or 30 interviews that they're doing per month, and you screw it up because you don't take an I-134 and therefore get refused, you're a lunatic if you do that, Jessica. So don't do that. Do everything you can to make sure you're 100% ready. Okay? Faith says, AF18K already had the interview, got the visa. Fantastic. Kindly advise on how long I can stay out of the USA without losing the green card. Need to complete studies. Okay. So the green card is a live and work visa. It's an assumption that you are going to live in the USA, and there are certain rules about that, which means that you have to show that you are trying to live in the USA. But basically, the rules are this: you can leave for up to 6 months and come back with very little risk. Under 6 months, right? Because when you come back, it's like you've just been away on a short trip. It's no big deal. Between 6 months and 12 months of absence, there's a bit more of a risk. There is a bit more of a technical assumption on their side that where they could ask you questions about why you're, where were you? Why were you gone so long? And that sort of thing. But generally, particularly in the first couple of visits while you're selling stuff back in the home country and that sort of thing, or wrapping up loose ends over there, that's okay, right? So absences up to 12 months are technically okay, but maybe a little bit more questioned than absences of 6 months or less, right? And an absence means from the day you leave to the day you come back, right? It's not a question of when you get your visa and counting from there. It's the day you leave the USA until the day you come back. That's what I mean by an absence. Then if you need to be absent for longer than 12 months, then you need to apply for a re-entry permit, which is an I-131 is the process you go through. And you've got to be in America to apply for that. And you have to wait in America for about 6 to 8 weeks typically while you do your biometrics. Then you can leave while they're still processing the I-131 form. And eventually, if they approve your re-entry permit, it will be sent to your home embassy, right? But it's not guaranteed. So the best way to keep your green card alive, as it were, is to come back every every 6 months. You can make it 12 months, but it's a bit more risky, right? So that's roughly the idea. So you just need to build in a couple of trips, and you can do that for a reasonable length of time, but you couldn't do that for years and years and years because eventually someone's going to ask you a question: why are you not living in the USA? And then at that point, they can admit you into the USA, but refer you to an immigration judge, and you have to go before that judge and explain what your plan is to actually, live in the USA, what ties you've put down, right? So that's hopefully that answers the question, Faith. Nepal 20K, any chance? Yeah, I mean, maybe. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't have a prediction for next month. Ankara interviewed EU case 25K, but from the SEAC data of 22, they interviewed until case number 40 in Africa in May, but 23. Can I explain why? No, I can't really explain why. It's too complicated to explain how they're doing things. But ACRA in particular are basically restricting the number of interviews they're taking on. And I don't know why that is. But in terms of which cases they interview, it's basically which went into the AV queue first, the queue of people in AV status. Okay. And comparing 1 year to the previous year, etc., is nuts. There's no point in doing that. It's just nuts. My case number 34K, DV23. It's supposed to be interviewed in Accra, but the embassy is working on a snail's pace. I just hope it gets my turn. Yeah, I hope so too. But I have to say, Anthony, if I were you, I would do everything I can to get the hell out of there, because the reality is, if I had $5 to bet with you, I'd probably say you're not going to get an interview in Accra, because they're gonna continue releasing 25 or 35 interview slots a month, which is not enough, and most people are going to miss out on Accra. So if you can get moved to a different embassy by moving to another country and getting that embassy to ask for your case from KCC, then that's the only way really to get that done, right? Okay. Just looking at the questions. Why do you skip 2022, Simon? Even starting from 8K winners not accepted in Ethiopia. I skip it because it was done. It's over. You've got to understand there is no point in waiting for DV2022. In the description of this live session, I said I'm taking questions on 2020, 21, 23, and 24. The reason I miss out 22 is not because I hate 22. It's because they issued all the visas. They issued them all. They issued more than they were supposed to issue. So there is no possible way that any other DV case in 2022 can get any other visa. It's done. It's over. You've got to understand that. And it sucks that people in Ethiopia didn't get a chance. With an 8K number, you should have got a chance. It's unfair. It's ridiculous. I know. I understand. But there's no point in thinking that anything can be done about it, because they already exhausted all of the visas. They were all used in other embassies in other countries around the world, right? And more than all of them, right? You can't get blood out of a stone. There are no more visas for DV 2022. So, Miska, you have to just accept that, right? It's unfair, but you have to come to terms with it and move on with your life and reapply again, or do whatever you need to do. But there's no point in continuing to torture yourself, frankly, thinking that somebody can do something to save you, because they can't. There's nothing that can be done, right? There's no lawsuit. There's nothing. There's no act of God coming. There's no presidential change. Nothing that can be done, because all the visas were used and more. Okay, that's basically it. I've had a number of questions from people who just don't seem to grasp that simple understanding about DV 2022. That's why I skip it, because there's nothing to talk about anymore. Okay, sorry to be so blunt, but I have to be blunt in order to save you the further pain, right? So I have an interview in July. I did make some big changes in my DS260, which I consider a red flag. Please, how can I convince the CO it was a mistake? Oh, geez. Again, you're asking me, you're not telling me what the big changes are. you're assuming it's a big red flag, but it's difficult for me to answer this sort of question unless you give me the information. Now, if you change things like you'd made some mistakes in the previous addresses that you lived at, or you listed your education history, perhaps not well, and you made some mistakes in there or whatever, then you corrected that. Those are not a big problem. But if you had originally said in your DS260 that you were married, and then you change that to being you're single, and then yeah, that's a big problem, right? And yes, they will have access to the form where you said you were married, etc. And there are some other significant things that you can do. But what do you mean by it's a red flag? I mean, just simple changes on the DS260 are not a red flag, okay? So there are some things that can cause problems, and there are other things that probably are not going to cause you any problems. Okay, so just be a bit more clear. What happened if I have my child's first and middle name reversed in the DV form? Anything I should do? Just make sure, if it was wrong in the DV entry, make sure it was corrected in the DS260. The DV entry is not legally a binding thing, right? But the DS260 itself is an application for an immigrant visa. It's a big deal. It's an important form you're filling out. That needs to be accurate. You have time to make it accurate. So check your spelling mistakes, check your name orders, check check all that, and make sure it's accurate in the DS260. And if you submitted the DS260 and you made a significant mistake, then don't be afraid to unlock it, right? Because the people that talk about unlocking don't know what the hell they're talking about. And so, the unlocking is fine. Correcting mistakes in the DS260 is fine. It's what you're supposed to do. You want an accurate DS260. Okay. I wish to know that the affidavit of support is always required. It's not always required, but when you need it, it can be the reason your case is refused if you don't have it, right? And it can cause delay. Essentially, the affidavit of support is one way of answering a question. The question in the mind of the CO is the person I'm about to give a visa to going to become a public charge? Will they have the finances or the abilities in order to survive financially in the USA without requiring public support, public money support, public benefits and that sort of thing, right? And in theory, every immigrant case should have that question posed in the mind of the CO. How they answer that question varies. It could be because they're looking at someone who's got an extremely good career prospects in the USA and therefore is not likely to become penniless and without support in the USA. That can be one way that can be answered. They may have their own savings. They may have $50,000 in the bank account, right? And the CO looks at those savings and says, okay, you've got enough savings. I can see you've got a good plan, right? No problem. Those people will be approved. They may not have savings. They may not have an exceptional career path. And so in those cases, someone might be asked for alternative proof that they're not going to become a public charge. And the I-134 is one way. Another way to answer that question is by having a sponsor in the USA, a taxpayer in the USA, who is prepared to offer you financial support. The I-134 is the affidavit of support you use in DV cases, not the I-864, which is used in other types of immigrant cases. But the I-134 is what you use, and it is a promise but not a legally binding contract from the sponsor to help you with finances and that sort of thing. And it's taken seriously, and it can be the difference between approval and not getting approval. But it's not always required because some other cases will have answered it the other ways I said, right? And there are various ways that the CO can make a judgment that this person will be okay. Okay. For many years, by the way, in Nepal, just on that public charge, in Nepal, there was a thing called a welcome letter. And it wasn't an affidavit of support. And Nepalese applicants are not particularly wealthy. But they had something called a welcome letter, which was basically a letter from someone in the USA who was willing to host them and was willing to help them and that sort of thing. And in Kathmandu, that was commonly used until about the last 2 or 3 years, and they've moved towards preferring an I-134 in Kathmandu. Okay. A winner of 2023, case number of AF22000, finished file DS260 in the end of October last year, and was waiting for the newborn baby. Do we still have hope for 2NL? Was waiting for the newborn baby. Oh, okay. You only filed the DS260 in October because you were waiting for the newborn baby. Yeah, you're probably processed by now, and you're probably in an AVQ. The question really is not about when you submitted in October. It's a question of which embassy you're at. If you're at an embassy that is working well, then you've got a great chance. If, on the other hand, you're assigned to a crappy embassy, unfortunately, that's probably going to be the problem. So, and you haven't told me that. You haven't told me which one you're assigned to. Arthur, you've been here before. AF28K from Cameroon. Submit on 15th of August, since the embassy have not given the 2NL last. Yeah, so just be patient. Cameroon actually are working okay. They're not working brilliant, but they're working okay. So there is a good chance for people in Cameroon, a lot more cases in Cameroon, to get a 2NL before the end of the year. Okay. What do you do after filling up the DS260? I made a video the other day, which is sort of taking the instructions. Normal process should be DS260, then you send in the documents when they've been requested, and then you wait for an interview. But the documents procedure, I think, will not be used this year, as it wasn't used in 2023, and it was actually stopped being used in DV2022. So my expectation is they're not going to be doing the documents procedure, and I think they've answered some people in that way, but they haven't changed the official instructions. So if the documents procedure is not going to be used, then between submitting the DS260 and your interview, all you do really is you wait. When you get the 2NL, you then go for your medical, you get your final papers together, etc., and you just wait. The only other thing you might want to do while you're waiting is figure out what it will take to get your police certificates. In some countries, police certificates can take quite a long time to obtain, and so you might want to apply for those early. And police certificates are valid for up to 2 years, right? So you can apply for them now, even if you don't expect to be interviewed for another 6 months or so, because it might take you 3 or 4 months to get the police certificate. So you want to apply for it early, okay? But other than that, you're probably just going to wait, okay? So for 2024 EU27, let me put it this way: have you got a chance to be invited for interview? That in previous years, in some years, that was a high number, right? But in 2024, it's probably not even a high number. Now, we won't know that for sure until July or August, but just hang on to your hats, submit your DS260 for sure at that number range, and just wait, and we'll know a little bit more later, okay? Milan saying, do you need to pay any fees after completing the DS260? There are no fees for just submitting the DS260. You'll pay your visa fee, your interview fee, on the day of the interview at the embassy. It's $330, and you pay per person. So if you've got a family of 4, it'll be 4 times $330. You pay that at the interview. The other fees that you'll pay is you pay the medical fees, which you have before the interview. And once you've been to the interview, and just before or just after you arrive in the USA, you pay another $220, which is for the production of your the plastic green card itself. Okay, so that's basically all the fees. There's no other fees. You shouldn't be paying other fees other than what I just mentioned. Hi Simon, does a 17-year-old need consent letter from the father for an interview? No. That's really interesting that you would think like that, Nadia. Now, I know in some countries a 17-year-old might need that sort of consent letter for a lot of things, but this is American law we're talking about, so no, that person does not need a consent letter to go through an immigration process like this. However, that 17-year-old has to meet the DV lottery requirements, right? So you've got to have met the level of education required, which in America is typically achieved by about the age of 18. So the rules don't say what the minimum age is for a DV lottery candidate, but they do say that in practical terms, the lowest age possible would be about 18. So some 17-year-olds can qualify, but you have to have passed the right level of education. And the education level we're talking about is the level at which you could enter university, right? So in the UK, where I went to school, high school finished at 16 when I was a kid. High school finished at 16 and had O levels, right? That's what kids at 16 had. They then had another 2 years of what we called college or sixth form college, where they did A levels. And A levels, passing the A levels, was what was necessary in order to enter university, which meant that completion of high school in the UK was not enough, right? Is not enough to pass the DV lottery. You needed to pass high school, then do your A levels, and have satisfactory passes of A levels, which meant you were about 18 in the UK to be at the same level as a high school graduate in the USA, which is really the qualification required, right? So you may or may not have met the education requirement, Nadia, but you don't need your parents' permission to go through this process, okay? Okay, I was selected in 2023. I noticed I was selected in November and submitted the DS260 in December. I'm in UAE. My case number is AS 5000. Do you think I have a chance? Yeah, you have a chance. I don't think the UAE embassy is doing brilliant, but they're not doing too bad. So you got a chance. Okay. Do you think Ankara will send to NL until September? I'm current since September. Okay, so just let me take that to NL till September. The September interviews are based on 2 NLs that are sent out in the late part of July and possibly early August. But they won't continue to send in a normal year 2 NLs in August and September for September interviews. That would be, I don't expect us to be in that position in this year, because I think the government have done the right thing in terms of the number of 2 NLs that they've sent and the number of visas issued and so on, in order to finish the process in a normal way, which means that by the first week or so of August, all the 2 NLs for September will have been sent out, right? But will they continue to interview people in September? Yeah, they probably will. So essentially there are July interviews being arranged now, then there'll be August interviews and September interviews, and that's it. And so July is about the last time for 2 NLs, July and first week of August, okay? 103K, I answered a question very similar to this, Madis, fairly early on in this live session. Go back and listen to my answer to that. It was I gave a fairly detailed answer to why, into how you can think about your case number, okay? 53K in EU, you didn't tell the year, but because it's 53K in EU, I know that must be DV2024, right? Do you have any chance? I don't know yet, because the same thing. Again, same thing I just said to Madis. Go back to an earlier point of the video and you'll see where I've explained about the density of cases and how many selectees there are, etc. Those are the important things to know whether your case number is really as high as it seems. I'll tell you this, I don't think a case number EU 53K is higher than a case number in DV 2023 of, let's say, EU 35K, right? Although they're higher numbers, I think your 53K will be better than an EU 35K and DV 2023, right? So, and if that's confusing, it's because you haven't watched the video I've made about this. There's a video I made about this called Huge Case Numbers, and that's well worth a watch. I've created videos about holes and how the holes happen, etc. I mean, I've got tons of content that explains this, but even just rewinding to the beginning of this video will help you. Okay. Understood about filing in the same fiscal year, but does FO deny his application considered filing prior to the case number being current, regardless of the early filing of what the early filing memo says? Yeah, I think you asked me questions on my blog about this. So with adjustment of status, there is a policy called the early filing policy, which basically says as the visa bulletin is issued each month, it gives a number. And let's say your case number is EU 10,000. And all of a sudden you see in the visa bulletin that let's say if the next visa bulletin we'll have will be published in June, and it'll be effective for interviews in August, right? So effectively, the visa bulletin in June is about numbers that are available from the 1st of August onwards. The early filing policy says that you can submit your I-485 between that June point when you see the visa bulletin issued that says your case number is going to be current on the 1st of August, right? You can submit it in that early period. That's the early filing policy. And generally speaking, 99 times out of 100, when you use that early filing policy, particularly if you do as I did and others did, which is putting the early filing memo on top and referring to the early filing policy on top of your package so that it's obvious what you're doing here, then it won't be rejected. There have been some cases where the adjustment of status package has been rejected because it was filed too early, even though it was filed within the terms of the early filing policy. When it's rejected, they send it back to you, you refile it. It's not the end of the world. You lose 2 or 3 weeks, right? It's not the end of the world. Now, the only sort of sub point about that is don't do the early filing policy prior to the 1st of October each year. So if, for example, you've got a very low case number that becomes that is announced in the visa bulletin that's published in August, which will be the first one for DV2024, and you see your case number is going to immediately be available from the 1st of October, don't take the early filing policy in that period of time, which is prior to the 1st of October, because you're not only early, but you're filing in the previous year, and that's much more likely to be rejected, even though it's not supposed to be rejected. Actually, if you read the early filing policy, it even gives that as an example of a perfectly appropriate filing that you can file in the year previous to the October 1st start. So, but yeah, it works. Now, you've already asked me this, I think, on my blog. I don't know why you're asking again. It's like you don't believe me, but that is the reality. I did it. Hundreds and thousands of people I've known have used that policy. Someone's mum, and hopefully you know who I'm talking about, recommends using the early filing policy. It's fine. But if you don't want to use it, don't use it. Don't keep asking me questions about it. It works. You seem to not believe it works for some reason. If you don't want to use it, nobody's forcing you to use it. It's just it's extra time that is valuable. But if you don't want to use it, your application will be delayed a bit, but that's up to you. Okay, so there you go. Is very big my number, says Badia. I don't know. I can't remember what your number is because I don't know everybody's number. Badia. So you're this one, right? 53K. Yeah, it's pretty big. It's not small, but it's not huge either, right? Please, Nigerians are eligible to apply. No, they're not. Nigerians that are married to people from other countries can apply through their spouse's country, but not Nigerians. Just like people from Bangladesh are not allowed to apply. Just like people from England or the UK are not allowed to apply, or people from China or various other countries. There are about 14 or 15 countries where you're not allowed to apply from those countries, or as a native of those countries, I should say. The reason is that those countries already get enough immigrants through other sources, and therefore, once they've met a certain cap, which is 50,000 people over 5 years, once they've met that cap, that country is removed from the list of eligible countries, and that happened to Nigeria some years ago, and it won't return. I don't think it's going to return anytime. So no, Nigerians can't apply and probably won't ever participate in the DV lottery again, I would have thought. Same as my own country. Okay. Now, how am I here? Well, because I'm married to a Spanish woman, a woman from Spain. So we applied under her birth country. Okay. Do I still have a chance to an L? So Kuala Lumpur, yeah, you got a chance. Just highest case number I've seen in South America. People keep asking this, but I don't think I've got a good handle on the highest case numbers in South America. I'm not getting enough South American case numbers reported to me in order to give a good sense of what the highest case numbers are. Okay, so I don't know, but I'd expect it to be in the 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 region, just based on what's happened or what I'm seeing in Oceania. Okay. Hi, Brit. I have an interview in July from Ghana. Geez, one of the few. Didn't include my high school certificate in my DS260, instead degree and masters. Will that be a problem? Take it all to the interview. Just take it all to the interview. I don't think it'll be a problem as long as you can show that you've got a good traditional path of education that went normal school, high school, university, master's degree. That should be good if you can just demonstrate all of that. But you were supposed to list it in the DS260, but it's not a disqualification for not doing so. It just makes it a little bit more important that you go very well prepared at the interview. Okay, let me answer a couple more quick questions here. Can we still apply for DV2025 while we already searching for DV2024? Absolutely, yes, you can. Anybody can apply. I've applied. I'm a citizen of the USA now, but I've applied. Anyone can apply. There's no harm in applying, right? Hishan says, I have a long name. Okay. There's no other question, just that. Good for you, Hishan. What's the process time of AOS? If in DS260 I choose consulate process, can I still apply for AOS once the case number becomes current? Be a bit careful with this. So the processing time of AOS, adjustment of status, typically, for most cases, takes 9 months to a year, etc. That's the sort of time, but not for DV cases. DV cases tend to go fast-tracked through the system. And so we're not talking a couple of weeks, we're talking still months. But it's normally done fast enough to make sure you get your visa before the end of the year, before the end of the September 30th deadline, right? So no matter how late you have to file, even if you're filing in early September, I've seen cases get through adjustment of status when they've only just filed in the beginning of September. It's possible, it's technically possible, just a bit risky. And so because of the early filing policy, the latest you should really be filing is in July. If you file in July, there is good time in order to get the adjustment of status through in the deadline. All right. So it can seem like it takes longer, by the way, for earlier cases in the year. They tend to take their sweet time until they work towards the deadline, basically. So my own case was adjustment of status. I was eligible for interview in June, didn't get my interview until September the 2nd in 2014. And I got really pissed off about that. But looking back, it doesn't matter. I was on an H1 visa here anyway, so I was comfortable and safe, and everything was fine. But it really did piss me off at the time, and I let them know I was pissed off about it. So but there it is. They did it just in time, and that's what they always planned, basically. Okay, let's see. Okay, last quick question here. I have a plan to travel for 1 month to Romania. My case is at stage 4, which you mean AV status, I believe. US Embassy Addis Ababa not working. Can I ask US Embassy in Romania? Who is to be asked in the embassy in the message? I don't know what to say with this one, actually, to be honest, because you say you've got a plan to travel for 1 month. You mean you can only be there for 1 month? The chance of you getting them to agree to interview you within that 1 month in Romania is slim to none. You can try. You can email the Romanian embassy and see if they'll take your case, but that's a long shot. But you may not have much of another a different shot. So take the chance that you might have. Right? Okay. Good luck with that. All right. I'll call that a day. But appreciate all your questions. If I didn't get to your question, please go and list that question at my blog, which is BritSimonSays.com, and I'll answer the question there. Okay. Don't list it like you do here, in some cases, listing it over and over and over again. Just put it there one time. And by the way, when you put questions at my blog, sometimes it doesn't appear immediately. It doesn't show up to you. You don't think it's been accepted by my blog. What's happening is that the system is designed to hold questions from new people for my review, in case some nutcase is just putting a bunch of crap in there. Then I get to see the question and I can approve it, so later questions will then be answered and published straight away. So anyway, go ahead and ask your questions on my blog, please. I hope this was interesting to you. I hope it's valuable to you. Please subscribe to my channel. Please give me a thumbs up to help me with the algorithm, and let your friends know this is the place for good DV lottery information. I'm not a lawyer. I don't charge fees. I don't answer questions one-on-one, right? I don't provide any personal services. I'm not like some of these YouTubers trying to charge you $200 for this and $500 for this type of service. I'm never going to do that. This is not my job. This is just a hobby. It's just something I do for free. And I'm proud of what I do, but it's not something I want to do as a job or anything. So please just accept that and ask me questions therefore in public on BritSimonSays.com. All right. Okay, everybody. Thank you very much indeed. Have a great day. Bye-bye now.